All right, I want you to picture this. You're in the boots of a 19th century explorer.
Okay.
The year is, let's say, 1828. You are Jean-François Champollion.
The guy. The one who just cracked the Rosetta Stone.
Hmm?
A total rock star.
The absolute rock star of linguistics, yeah. And you're walking through the dust and heat of ancient Thebes, specifically the temple complex of Karnak. You're reading walls that haven't been understood for, nearly 2,000 years? And then suddenly, you hit a wall.
And not a physical one.
Not a physical wall, no, though I'm sure there were plenty of those. I mean, a cognitive wall. You're just stuck.
It's that moment where the grammar just stops making any sense.
Exactly. You're looking at this carving of a pharaoh. All the iconography is there. It's standard issue. You know, the royal kilt, the muscular chest, the double crown and the beard. This figure is doing all the standard king stuff.
Making offerings to the gods, smiting enemies, the usual.
Right. But then you start to read the hieroglyphs right next to the head. And the grammar is, well, it's wrong. The verbs have feminine endings. The pronouns are she and her.
It's like reading His Majesty the Queen. It just doesn't compute.
It doesn't. Champollion was completely baffled. He actually wrote in his journals about being confused by this bearded queen.
He must have thought the scribes had lost their minds, or maybe that he was misreading his own great discovery.
Yeah, a crisis of confidence. But he wasn't looking at a typo. He was looking at the very first thread of a mystery that would, over the next century, unravel one of the greatest cover-ups in human history.
A truly incredible story.
Today, we are diving deep into that very mystery. We are talking about Hatshepsut, and I think we need to get the terminology straight right out of the gate. We aren't talking about a queen in the way you might think, like a king's wife.
No, that's a vital distinction.
We are talking about a woman who became the king.
And that changes everything.
Hmm.
In ancient Egypt, the title queen, or Hemet Neset Weret, meant great royal wife. It was an incredibly powerful role, for sure, but it was fundamentally a supportive one. Hatshepsut. She didn't stay in that lane.
No. She merged into the fast lane, took the wheel, and drove the entire empire as a full-blown pharaoh.
The king of Upper and Lower Egypt.
So for this deep dive, we've got a massive stack of sources. We're pulling from the main Wikipedia archives on her reign and her many, many monuments. We've got archaeological reports from the temple at Deir el-Bahari and some really gritty modern forensic analysis of, well, what we think is her mummy.
And that's a whole story in itself.
It is. So our mission today is to unpack how a woman navigated what was arguably the strictest patriarchy in the ancient world to become a superpower. We need to understand why she wore a fake beard, and we're definitely going to get into the CSI-style investigation into her death and the attempted deletion of her entire existence.
It's a story of political genius, architectural grandeur, and then a very cold, very calculated erasure.
So let's set the stage. Who is this woman? Because she didn't just walk in off the street. I mean, she was the ultimate insider, wasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. She was born into the 18th Dynasty. Now, for context, you have to understand, the 18th Dynasty is the absolute peak of the New Kingdom.
If you think of Egypt's history like a movie franchise, the Old Kingdom of the Pyramids is the original trilogy, right?
That's a great way to put it. And the 18th Dynasty is the massive, big-budget reboot. Egypt is wealthy, it's powerful, it's expanding its empire. And Hatshepsut is the daughter of Thutmose III.
Who was no slouch himself.
Not at all. He was a great warrior king who expanded Egypt's borders from Nubia in the south all the way to the Euphrates River in the north. A legendary figure.
And her mother was Queen Ahmose, so genetically speaking, she's royalty squared.
She has the purest bloodline you could possibly have. But, and this is the big but, there is a biological glass ceiling. The role of Pharaoh is inherently theologically masculine. The Pharaoh is the living embodiment of the god Horus, who is a male god. So despite her incredible pedigree, Hatshepsut was raised to be a wife and a mother to kings, not a king herself.
And this brings us to the family tree, or, as I like to call it in Egyptian history, the family wreath.
It is very circular, yes.
It really is. And you have to remember, to keep the royal bloodline concentrated, to keep that divinity from getting diluted, they practiced close kin marriage.
So Hatshepsut marries her half-brother, Thutmose II.
I always have to mentally brace myself for the incest part of these stories, but for them it was theology, right? It wasn't just weirdness, they were literally mimicking the gods.
Exactly. The foundational myth involved the brother-sister gods Osiris and Isis. So for royalty, it was all about legitimacy. So Thutmose II becomes pharaoh, and Hatshepsut becomes his great royal wife.
Now, Thutmose II, how do we put this politely? He wasn't exactly the MVP of the dynasty.
No, his reign is short, maybe 13 or 14 years. The evidence suggests he wasn't particularly healthy, and he dies pretty young.
And his death is what triggers the whole crisis, because they didn't have a son together.
Correct. Thutmose II and Hatshepsut had a daughter, Neferor. But the king did have a son with a secondary wife, the woman from the harem named Iset. This boy is named Thutmose III.
Okay, let's just track the names for a second because it can get a little confusing. We have Thutmose I, the legendary dad.
Right.
Then Thutmose II, the dead husband/brother.
Yes.
And now Thutmose III, the stepson/nephew.
You've got it. So Thutmose II dies. The rightful heir, by all tradition, is the boy, Thutmose III. But here's the problem. Thutmose III is a toddler.
Like, how young are we talking?
We think he was maybe 2 or 3 years old.
Wow. And you cannot have a 2-year-old running an empire.
It's just impossible.
Yeah.
The pharaoh has to lead the army into battle. He has to preside over these complex religious rituals to maintain mox, the concept of cosmic order and truth. If the king can't do the job, Matat is threatened, and chaos, it follows.
So this massive power vacuum opens up.
A huge one. And into that vacuum steps Hatshepsut. But, and this is important, initially she plays by the rules. She becomes the regent.
Which was a known thing.
Right. It was a standard constitutional role. We have other examples in Egyptian history of mothers or stepmothers ruling on behalf of their infant sons until they come of age. And for the first few years, this is exactly what she does. The inscriptions from that early period show her standing behind or next to the child king.
She's the power behind the throne, managing the administration, appointing officials, basically keeping the seat warm.
She's the dutiful stepmother.
Yeah.
So far, so good. But then something shifts.
A big shift.
Somewhere around year 7 of the reign, the narrative changes completely. She stops being the regent for the king. She adopts the full royal titulary, the 5 sacred names that only a true pharaoh can hold.
She takes the throne name Motker.
Motker, which means truth is the soul of Re. She effectively looks at the court, at the priesthood, at the entire country and says, I am not holding this throne for the boy anymore. I am the king.
This is the moment that just fascinates me. How do you just do that? Was it a coup? Did she have the army on her side? It feels like it must have been a hostile takeover.
That's the modern interpretation we often jump to, the wicked stepmother stealing the birthright.
Yeah.
But the evidence suggests something much more subtle, much more clever.
So she didn't just lock Thutmose III in a tower.
No, not at all. She didn't kill him. She didn't exile him. In fact, she kept him as a co-ruler. But she completely restructured the hierarchy.
How so?
Well, she used the dual nature of Egyptian kingship to her advantage. She positioned herself as the senior ruler, the Osiris figure, the established wise divine authority.
And that pushed Thutmose III into the junior role.
Exactly. He was relegated to the role of Horus, the youthful junior heir who was learning at the feet of the master. She wasn't removing him from the line of succession. She was just permanently outranking him.
And she did something really clever with the calendar, didn't she? The regnal years.
This is just brilliant political maneuvering. When she declares herself king in what was year 7, she doesn't start a new calendar at year 1 of Hatshepsut. She continues the count from the death of her husband.
So she's basically erasing the regency from the official record.
Completely. She's backdating her reign, effectively claiming she had been the true king the entire time. It's a way of smoothing over the transition and making it seem inevitable.
That is such a power move. Actually, I haven't been the interim CEO for 7 years. I've been the permanent CEO, and I'd like the minutes to reflect that. Thank you.
It is. But we have to ask why she did it. It probably wasn't just vanity or raw ambition. Most historians now believe there was a genuine threat to the stability of the dynasty.
A toddler on the throne is a target.
A huge target. It's a magnet for ambitious generals, rival court factions, civil war, foreign invasion. By becoming a full pharaoh, she was creating a kind of super-presidency to protect the throne. In a way, she might have seen it as the only way to safeguard her stepson's future inheritance.
So it could have been an act of protection, not theft. That really recontextualizes the whole thing.
It does.
But even with the best intentions, she had a massive marketing problem, what Egyptologists call the Hatshepsut problem. How do you sell a female king to a society that fundamentally believes the king is the son of the sun god?
You have to change the packaging. And this is where her propaganda machine just goes into overdrive. The most visible part of that is her image, her statues.
If you walk through a museum and look at her statues chronologically, you can literally see her trying to figure it out.
It's like watching someone experiment with their personal brand in real time. It's fascinating. In the very earliest statues, she's depicted as a woman in a woman's dress. but she's striking a pose that's usually reserved for a king. And it looks,
A little awkward.
it is. The
Mm-hmm.
visual language doesn't quite match the title. Then she starts adding the royal accessories, the cot headcloth, the uraeus cobra on her forehead.
But the body is still recognizably female?
At first, yes. But then the transformation accelerates, the waist thickens, the breasts disappear, flattened into a masculine chest. The shoulders get broad and muscular. She starts wearing the shendit kilt, which is strictly men's ceremonial clothing. And then finally,
She puts on the beard.
she puts on the beard.
The famous false beard. I think this is the one detail everyone remembers about her, but I want to be really clear for you listening. Was she walking around the palace in drag? Was she actively trying to trick her advisors into thinking she was a man?
No, and that is such a crucial distinction. In ancient Egypt, art wasn't about photographic realism. It was about representing the ideal, the theological truth of an office.
So the beard wasn't a disguise?
Not at all. The
Yeah.
beard, the divine beard, was a symbol of the gods. Even male pharaohs didn't grow real beards like that. They wore false ones, often made of goat hair, strapped to their chins during ceremonies. It was a piece of costume that signaled, I am not just a mortal man, I am the divine ruler.
So by putting the beard on her statue, she's basically saying respect the rank, not the gender.
Exactly. It was a political theater. She was adopting the persona of the office. It's like a judge putting on a robe. The robe doesn't make them a different person, but it signals to everyone in the room, I am now the embodiment of the law. Hatshepsut was saying, I am the pharaoh.
And the inscriptions sometimes mix the grammar, right?
They did. Which is so interesting. You'd see a masculine image of her with the beard, but the text next to it would say, His Majesty, she. She wasn't trying to hide her womanhood. She was trying to create a new category, to transcend gender entirely, to fit the theological requirements of the job.
But she didn't just stop at the clothes and the beard. She went back and rewrote her own creation story. This is the divine birth sequence, right?
This is pure theological genius. It's one of the centerpieces of her great temple. She commissioned these massive, beautiful reliefs that tell the story of how she was conceived. But in her version of the story, her father isn't just Thutmose I.
Okay, so who is it?
It's Amun-Re, the king of the gods himself. The story goes that Amun held a great council of the gods and announced his plan to create a great ruler for Egypt. He then disguises himself as Thutmose I and goes to the palace to visit Queen Ahmose.
Visits her. I see.
The text is actually quite explicit and poetic. It says the queen was awakened by the fragrance of the god. It says Amun imposed his desire upon her, and she rejoiced at the sight of his beauty. They conceive Hatshepsut.
So she's claiming to be a literal demigod.
More than that, and this is the real kicker. Amun then goes to Khnum, the creator god who fashions human beings on a potter's wheel.
Right.
Amun instructs Khnum to shape Hatshepsut's body and her ka, her spirit, double. And he explicitly tells him, make her in the form of a king.
Wow. That is audacious. She's claiming, you can't question my right to rule because God is literally my dad, and he decided I should be king before I was even born.
It's the ultimate trump card. There's no arguing with it. She even claimed that the Oracle of Amun had proclaimed her king when she was just a child. She orchestrated this full-spectrum PR blitz to legitimize her rule. She covered every single base, legal, theological, and visual.
And the amazing thing is, it actually worked. The people accepted it. The powerful priesthood of Amun accepted it. And the empire didn't crumble. In fact, she kicked off this incredible economic boom. We get so stuck on the gender stuff. But she was a killer administrator.
She really was. Her reign wasn't primarily defined by war. Though she did lead some successful military campaigns in Nubia, her reign was really defined by trade and prosperity.
And you have to remember the context here. Before the 18th Dynasty, Egypt had been occupied by foreign invaders called the Hyksos.
Right, during the Second Intermediate Period. And during that time, Egypt was weak and isolated. The great international trade networks had completely collapsed. Hatshepsut made it her mission to turn the lights back on, economically speaking.
And the crown jewel of this entire policy was the expedition to the Land of Punt.
The Land of Punt. This was a semi-mythical place to the Egyptians known as God's Land. We aren't 100% sure where it was, but the modern consensus places it somewhere in the Horn of Africa, maybe Eritrea, Somalia, or Eastern Sudan.
And she sends a fleet down the Red Sea. This wasn't a small trip. This was like the ancient equivalent of the moon landing for trade missions.
It was a massive logistical undertaking. The reliefs at her temple are incredibly detailed. They show 5 large ships, fully rigged, departing from a Red Sea port. And when they get to Punt, they don't just trade for a few trinkets, they empty the place.
What was the haul they brought back?
Oh, it's a laundry list of every luxury good the ancient world desired. Gold, ivory, ebony, leopard skins, ostrich feathers, exotic animals like baboons and even giraffes. But the most impressive cargo, by far, was the trees.
The myrrh trees.
Yes. The reliefs show Egyptian sailors carefully carrying 31 live myrrh trees with their root balls still packed in baskets of native soil.
Wait a minute, they were transplanting live trees in 1400 BC.
It is the first recorded attempt in human history to transplant foreign flora. She brought them all the way back to Thebes and planted them in the courtyards of her mortuary temple. Her goal was to create a garden for Amun, right there in the Egyptian desert.
But why myrrh? I know it smells good, but was it really worth hauling trees on a boat for hundreds of miles?
For them, it was absolutely essential. Myrrh was burned as incense in the temples every single day, multiple times a day. It was the smell of the gods. By securing a direct source, she was cutting out the expensive middleman and securing the spiritual health of the entire nation. It was both an act of piety and a brilliant economic move.
There's a specific detail in the sources about another resin, frankincense, that I just loved. It makes her feel so human.
You mean the eyeliner?
Yes, the eyeliner.
The records show she had the frankincense resin charred and then ground down to make kohl eyeliner. It's the first recorded use of the resin for cosmetic purposes.
It just shows this incredible blend of tough economic policy and, personal luxury. She's the CEO securing the global supply chain, but she's also the first one to use the product.
She knew what she wanted.
I also want to touch on the depiction of the people of Punt in those reliefs, specifically their queen, Queen Atiti. This really stands out because Egyptian art is usually photoshopped.
It is. Egyptian art is almost always idealized. Everyone is young, they're slim, they're athletic, regardless of their actual age or appearance. But when the artists depicted the Puntites, they seem to have switched to a kind of documentary realism. And Queen Atati is depicted with a very distinct body type.
The term is stetopagus, I believe?
That's correct. It refers to a substantial accumulation of fat on the buttocks and thighs. She is shown with rolls of flesh and a very pronounced curvature of the spine.
So was this an insult? Were the Egyptian artists caricaturing her?
That's the debate. Some older art historians viewed it as a way of mocking the other, the foreigner. But most modern scholars think it was probably just accurate reporting.
This is what we saw.
Exactly. This is what we saw. It is different from us, but it is real. And in a way, it adds a layer of authenticity to Hatshepsut's propaganda. She's basically saying, I really sent ships there. My people really met this queen. Here is the proof in all its detail.
So she's bringing in the wealth. She's reestablishing trade. But a pharaoh also has to build. You can't be a great king without piling up some rocks, and Hatshepsut piled up a lot of rocks.
She was one of the most prolific builders in the history of ancient Egypt. I think she felt she had a lot to prove, and she proved it in stone on a massive scale. If you go to the Karnak temple complex today, her mark is everywhere. She erected these twin obelisks that were, at the time, the tallest in the entire world.
I feel like we just take obelisks for granted sometimes. Oh, a big pointy stone. But the engineering required to make and raise one is just mind-boggling.
It's unbelievable. We're talking about a single monolithic piece of red granite weighing hundreds of tons that was quarried in Aswan hundreds of miles to the south.
And then floated down the Nile on a massive barge.
And then you have to somehow drag it to the temple and raise it perfectly upright without it cracking or breaking. It's an absolute engineering marvel. And one of hers is still standing at Karnak today. It's nearly 30 meters high. That's like a 10-story building carved from a single rock.
And she didn't just build big, she built differently. We have to talk about her masterpiece, Djeser Djeseru.
The temple at Deir el-Bahari. In my opinion, it's the most beautiful building in all of Egypt, and it looks shockingly modern.
I've seen the pictures. It doesn't look like the pyramids or the other heavy fortress-like temples. It looks like something Frank Lloyd Wright would design.
That is a very common comparison, and it's a good one. It's built directly into these huge limestone cliffs on the west bank of the Nile, opposite Luxor. But instead of fighting the landscape, the temple works with it.
How so?
It's designed as a series of 3 broad open terraces connected by long ramps with these beautiful colonnades. The vertical columns of the temple perfectly echo the vertical cracks in the cliff face right behind them. And the horizontal lines of the terraces echo the geological layers of the rock. It's organic architecture, 3,000 years before the term even existed.
And the architect behind this masterpiece was a man named Senenmut.
Senenmut. Now, here is a fascinating character.
The sources, they hint at some rumors.
Oh, historians love to speculate about Sedenmud. He was a commoner by birth. His parents were nobody special. But he rose to incredible heights under Hatshepsut. He ended up holding over 90 different titles.
90 titles? That seems a little excessive, like vice president of everything?
He was the great steward of Amun, overseer of all the works of the king, overseer of the granaries, and crucially, he was the tutor to Hatshepsut's daughter, Neferrer. He was, without a doubt, the man closest to the queen.
And because he was a lifelong bachelor and she was a widow, people talk, even 3,500 years ago.
They do.
Hmm.
And there's even some, well, ancient graffiti about it. In an unfinished tomb nearby, workers sketched a crude drawing that seems to show a pharaoh identifiable by the headdress and a commoner in, let's say, a compromising sexual position.
Wow. An ancient political scandal. The queen and the architect.
We'll never know for sure if they were lovers, but we do know they were incredibly close political partners. She even granted him the unheard-of honor of building his own tomb right near the entrance to her temple. Their fates are absolutely linked.
She also used her buildings to cement her own narrative in writing. There's another temple, the Speos Artemidos, where she engages in some serious trash talk about her predecessors.
Yes, the Temple of Paquette, a lioness goddess. She had a long inscription carved there where she just denounces the Hyksos, those foreign invaders we mentioned earlier. She says, "I have restored that which had been ruined. I have raised up that which had gone to pieces."
She's essentially saying, the men lost Egypt. I, the woman, fixed it.
That's exactly the message. She frames herself as the great restorer of Ma'at. She claims she is cleaning up the mess left by the Asiatics who ruled from the Delta. It's this very powerful assertion of her legitimacy. Look at the chaos that came before me, and now look at the perfect order I have brought.
So she's winning, she's rich, she's building incredible monuments, the gods supposedly love her, but time is the one thing no pharaoh can defeat.
She ruled for about 22 years in total. Around year 15 of her reign, she celebrated her Hibsed, or Jubilee Festival.
Wait, hold on. Isn't the Jubilee usually for year 30 of a king's reign?
Conventionally, yes. It's a very ancient ritual of rejuvenation for an aging king. The pharaoh literally had to run a ceremonial course to prove they were still physically fit to rule. The fact that she held it in year 15 is very strange.
So why do it so early?
There are a bunch of theories. Maybe she was counting the years from her father's death to link her reign more closely to his, completely skipping over her brother-husband. Maybe she felt her health was failing and she needed the magical boost from the ritual.
Or maybe she just felt she had accomplished 30 years worth of work in half the time.
I'm so efficient. I'm taking my Jubilee early. I like that theory.
It has a certain Hatshepsut flair.
It does. But after year 20, she starts to fade from the historical record. By year 22, around 1458 BC, Thutmose III, the stepson, who's been waiting in the wings this whole time, takes over as the sole ruler.
So she dies. Do we know how?
For a very long time, we didn't. We didn't even have her body. She had prepared a magnificent tomb for herself in the Valley of the Kings, KV-20. She actually had it expanded to curve deep underground to connect with her father's tomb. She wanted to lie beside Thutmose's mother for all eternity.
But when Howard Carter, the same guy who found King Tut, cleared out KV-20 in 1903, it was empty, wasn't it?
Totally empty. Her stone sarcophagus was there, but no body. So for a century, the great King Hatshepsut was a missing person.
And this brings us to the cold case part of our deep dive. Where was she?
Well, Carter had actually found another, much smaller tomb back in 1903 called KV-60. It was a minor, insignificant tomb stripped of all its valuables in antiquity. Inside, he found 2 female mummies.
And one was identified.
Yes, one was in a coffin labeled Cedar Inn, who we know was Hatshepsut's childhood wet nurse.
Okay, and the other one?
The other mummy was just lying on the floor. No coffin, no name tag, nothing. One of her arms was bent across her chest in the classic royal pose, but Carter didn't think much of it at the time. He took some notes, removed a few items, and resealed the tomb, leaving them there.
Just left them on the floor. That
Yeah.
seems incredibly disrespectful.
It was a very different era in archaeology. If it wasn't covered in gold, it often wasn't that interesting to them. It wasn't until 2007 that Dr. Zahi Hawass decided to reopen the investigation. He had the unidentified mummy, now called KV-60A, brought to the Cairo Museum for a full CT scan.
And this is where the detective work gets incredibly specific. They needed a direct link, some piece of physical evidence to prove who she was.
And they had a clue from a completely different place. Years earlier, archaeologists had found a small wooden box in a different cache of royal mummies, DB-320.
Right.
It was a canopic box used for storing a person's mummified internal organs. and it had Hatshepsut's name clearly inscribed on the outside.
And what was inside the box?
A mummified liver, or maybe a spleen, and a single loose molar tooth.
A tooth in a box of organs? That's odd.
It can happen. During the mummification process, things get a bit messy. Sometimes loose parts, like a tooth, get packed away with the organs by mistake. So Hawass's team had this tooth. They look at the CT scans of the mummy, KV60A. She was an elderly woman, she was obese, she had very bad teeth, and she was missing a molar.
Let me guess, it was a perfect match.
The tooth from the box fit the empty socket in the mummy's jaw perfectly, like a key in a lock, to the millimeter. Based on that physical evidence, Dr. Hawass officially identified mummy KV60A as the lost pharaoh, Hatshepsut.
That is incredible. A puzzle piece just waiting 3,000 years to be clicked back into place.
It's a stunning piece of forensic archaeology.
So if that is her, what does her body tell us? How did the great queen really die?
It definitely wasn't a glorious death. The forensic analysis paints a picture of a woman who was in significant pain in her later years. She was probably in her late 40s or early 50s. She was obese, which suggests she was likely diabetic, and she had terrible arthritis.
The stress of wearing the crown takes a toll.
A huge toll. But the actual killer was likely an aggressive form of bone cancer. And here is where the story gets even more interesting and tragic. They found a flask in her possession. A lotion, or salve flask.
Lotion, you mean like moisturizer?
Something like that. When they did a chemical analysis of the residue inside the flask, they found traces of benzopyrene. That is a highly carcinogenic substance, often found in things like coal tar.
Why on earth was she using tar lotion?
The leading theory is that she suffered from a chronic genetic skin disease, maybe a severe form of eczema or psoriasis. It would have been intensely itchy and painful. She was likely using this tar-based soothing lotion to try and stop the itch.
And the lotion itself was giving her cancer.
It seems very, very likely. She was slowly poisoning herself in an attempt to find relief from her daily suffering. It just paints such a human picture of this divine ruler. We see the gold and the giant statues, but in reality, she may have been a sick woman suffering in private, applying this salve that was secretly killing her.
That is just tragic. But
Yeah.
I have to ask, is everyone convinced? Science is rarely that neat and tidy.
You're right to be skeptical. And in 2011, some later studies threw a pretty big wrench in the works. Some forensic dentists who examined the data argued that the tooth found in the box was a molar from a lower jaw.
Okay.
But the mummy, KV60A, was missing a molar from her upper jaw.
Oh, that doesn't fit. You can't put a lower tooth in an upper socket.
Exactly. If that analysis is correct, then the perfect match is invalid. So we think we found her. The circumstantial evidence is incredibly strong. That she was found with her wet nurse, the royal arm pose, the physical condition. But there is legitimate scientific doubt. The case isn't fully closed.
So she dies, maybe from cancer, maybe not. She's buried. And Thutmose III, her stepson, finally gets the throne all to himself.
And he goes on to become one of the greatest military leaders in all of Egyptian history. They call him the Napoleon of Egypt. He leads something like 17 military campaigns and conquers everything in sight.
And for 20 years, everything seems fine regarding Hatshepsut's memory. Her statues are up, her name is on the temples, but then the hammers come out.
This is the erasure, the official damnatio memoriae. Late in Thutmose III's long reign, a full 2 decades after she is dead and buried, stonemasons are systematically sent out to every temple in the land.
And their job is to delete her.
Their job is to delete her. They meticulously chisel her cartouches, her name, off the walls. They smash her hundreds of statues into pieces and dump them in pits near her temple.
And they didn't just break them. In some places, they walled them up.
At Karnak, yes. They built these thick stone walls around the base of her giant obelisks to completely hide the inscriptions. They couldn't tear the obelisks down without destroying the whole temple, so they just boxed them in, hid them from view.
So why wait 20 years? This is the big question. If Thutmose III was this angry, resentful stepson whose throne was stolen, wouldn't he smash her statues on day one?
That is the absolute key that unlocks the motive. The old theory was that it was all about personal resentment, that he hated her. But that 20-year gap just kills that theory. You don't wait 2 decades to act on a hot-headed grudge like that.
So if it wasn't hatred, what was it?
It was cold, hard politics. It was all about the line of succession. You see, towards the end of his life, Thutmose III was getting old. He was preparing his own son, Amenhotep II, to take the throne. And the succession wasn't entirely secure.
Were there other claimants to the throne?
There were likely other factions. Remember, Hatshepsut had a daughter. There might have been a branch of the family descended from Hatshepsut that could, theoretically, make a claim to the throne.
So the very existence of a female king precedent was dangerous.
Exactly. A female pharaoh was a glitch in the matrix. It upset the cosmic order of Maat. If Hatshepsut remained on the books as a successful, legitimate king, it might encourage other women or other non-traditional heirs to try and take the throne in the future.
It would legitimize usurpers.
Precisely. To ensure the smooth, legitimate transfer of power in the male line, from Thutmose I to Thutmose III, and then to Amenhotep II, the historical anomaly of Hatshepsut had to be deleted.
It wasn't about hurting her personally.
No, she was already with the gods. It was about streamlining the history books for the sake of the future. It was just dynastic housekeeping.
Cold, calculated political editing.
And very thorough. They pasted Thutmose I or Thutmose II's names over hers. They tried to make it look like the succession went straight from father to son to grandson, completely skipping the woman in the middle.
And they almost got away with it.
They came very, very close. Her name was removed from all the official king lists that later pharaohs would compile. For thousands of years, history simply forgot her.
Until Jean-François Champollion looked at that wall in Karnak and saw a feminine verb next to a bearded king.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? If they had been more destructive, if they had completely pulverized all of her monuments, we probably wouldn't know nearly as much. But by just chiseling out the name and leaving the image, or by walling up the obelisks, they actually preserved her.
How so?
Well, the masonry casing they built around her obelisks protected the delicate carvings from 2,000 years of wind and sun and sand. When modern archaeologists took those walls down, her inscriptions were crisp and fresh, almost like they were carved yesterday.
So the very attempt to hide her is exactly why she's so well preserved for us today.
History has a wicked sense of humor.
So bringing it all together, what is the legacy of Hatshepsut today? We've found her, probably. We've read her words. We've seen her beard. How do we view her now?
James Henry Breasted, one of the great early Egyptologists, called her the first great woman in history of whom we are informed. And I think that still holds up. She proved that a woman could rule one of the most powerful empires on earth, not just as a placeholder, but as a visionary builder and a brilliant politician.
She wasn't just a woman who acted like a king. She was the king who happened to be a woman.
And she was a master of reinvention. She had to reinvent her image, her personal history, her very nature to do what she believed was necessary for Egypt. She understood the power of symbols and propaganda better than almost anyone in history.
It really makes you wonder, though. Thutmose III's masons missed a few spots. So we know about Hatshepsut. But how many other Hatshepsuts were there throughout history?
That is the question that keeps historians up at night. It's a sobering thought. We only know what wasn't successfully destroyed. How many other rule breakers, innovators, or glitches in the matrix were successfully erased because the person who came next had a hammer and a chisel and a better story to tell?
A haunting thought to end on. History isn't just what happened, it's what survives the edit. Thanks for diving deep with us into the incredible life of the king herself.
A pleasure, as always.
We'll see you next time.